Karen asks for a VIP table, saying she knows the owner. I'm the owner, and she was left crying with a $4,000 bill after my revenge. Karen storms into the restaurant, screaming that she knows the owner and that we must give her and her group of pals the VIP table reserved for celebrities. The trouble is, I own the restaurant and have no idea who this lady is. I decided to play along and see what happened during dinner. One of the girls asked me whether I thought my life was meaningful. I was just a waiter at the time and I thought it was all meaningless. But then I realized that I could finally exact my retribution. This all happened around Christmas and New Year's. My grandparents immigrated to Canada from Italy in the 1970s and established a restaurant. When they died, my parents took over the restaurant, which they grew and enlarged throughout the decades. I've been working at the restaurant since I was 15. As my parents got older, they retired and became snowbirds, spending the winters in Florida. They sold the restaurant to me a few years ago, but they kept a tiny percentage of the stock as a source of income on the side, in addition to their savings. As soon as I took possession, I modernized the old place. I rebuilt the restaurant, altered the logo, and contacted local and national newspapers to place advertisements. I invited food critics, bloggers, and vloggers. It was slow at first, and I began to fear that the loan I took out to undertake all of this might not be paid back. It was a big mistake. I ruined 3 generations of a family company. But it all started to work out. A local YouTuber included us in one of his videos, which got more people to visit and review us. Even on a Monday, we were seeing 5 to 10 times the regular volume of activity. We became a destination for large events. It was not uncommon for a celebrity to stop by on certain evenings. I even invited certain high-profile clients to visit. We were so happy to cook for our guests, but it did cost a fortune. We were completely booked for the holidays. People had to make reservations in July just to get a table in December. It took years to get to this point. When things got busy, I didn't just sit in the back office. I was on the floor, helping out however I could. I'd greet customers, bus tables, or mop the floors on nights with high-profile guests or events. I'd even wear a jacket and take charge. One night, 6 women walked in. The group seemed to be mostly in their early 20s, with the leader looking to be in her mid-20s. I figured she was probably an older sorority sister to incoming college students or an elder sister of one of the other girls. I was greeting them at the entrance when Queen Bee Karen came over. She was telling the baby cars how fantastic this restaurant is, how delicious the food is, and how there might even be celebrities there. When she came over to me, she explained that she needed a table. Of course. Can I get the name on the reservation? She stared at me for a moment, then responded, "Oh, I didn't make one, but it's okay. The owner is a personal friend of mine. He always keeps 1 or 2 tables open for special guests, and we can have one of those tonight." This is true for many high-profile restaurants, and I've been doing it recently as well. But I had no idea who this woman was, and she had never discussed any of this with me. I understood she was attempting to get in without a reservation, but she had chosen the worst person to try this with. I told her, "I'm sorry, but we cannot seat anyone without a reservation. As you can see, we don't have any seats available." I didn't want to go all out and say, "I'm the owner, and we've never spoken before," so I didn't make any promises. But I didn't want to embarrass her in front of the other girls she was with at the time. She then instructed. One of the other girls took a picture of me. She announced that she would speak with the owner and ensure that I was either scrubbing toilets or fired by the end of the week. The other girls behind her joined in, saying things like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to kiss your minimum wage job goodbye." I wasn't sure if they were in on it with her or if they truly believed she knew the owner, Queen Bee Karen. Then she said, "Look, you can either give us a table or I can make your life very difficult. This is not. It's worth losing your job," she kept saying, pointing and trying to belittle me. She even went as far as to say, "Obviously you aren't anyone here, because if you were, you would know who I am and never try to tell me anything other than yes or of course." She was constantly attempting to put me down. At that moment, it had been a hard day for me. From my perspective, I had three options. I could have just handed her the table and let things go, or I could have chosen option 2. Instead, I smiled at her and said, "Of course, ma'am. Please follow me." I handed her one of the 3 tables we leave free in case a celebrity walks in, which occurs occasionally. I told her I was sorry for everything and that I thought it would be simpler just to give her the table. I also told her that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be free. Then, I seated them. I served them personally, as they sat. I told them we just need one of your credit cards and IDs, just to keep on file, and we'll return them to you before you leave. Queen Karen handed me her card and told the baby Karen minions, "Tonight is on me." I took their orders, gave them their free beverages, and told them that, because we were so busy tonight, the meal might be delayed. The females only worried about the free drinks. They ordered 3 rounds, and still hadn't received any food. Eventually, I called to check on the order and was met with some less than ideal attitudes. I told them I would look into it and asked if they wanted more drinks. They ordered 2 more rounds, and by the time the appetizers arrived, they were pretty full from drinking on an empty stomach for most of the night and just eating salads. As more food came out, more drinks were ordered. What these girls didn't realize was that they were at our VIP table, which normally costs a pretty penny. It was a few $1,000s to sit at that table, but I didn't charge them for it except for the first 3 rounds. I charged them for all of the very expensive cocktails they had throughout the evening. As I said before, the table they were sitting at was VIP, so the menus had different prices. Prices aren't displayed on these menus. That's a restaurant industry trade secret. They also offered higher-end menu items such as white truffle black caviar meals and specially imported West Coast oysters, among others. At one point during the night, I was really starting to wonder what I was doing. I was worried I was going too far with these poor girls. They might not know any better, but certain things encouraged me throughout the night. One of the baby Kens even questioned whether I thought my life was pointless, because all I ever became was a server. One of the staff told me that they were planning how to mess with me, believing that they could do so whenever they wanted, and that I would always give them a table. I overheard that, too. By the end of the night, I was starting to wonder if I was being a bit too much for these poor girls. They didn't know any better, after all. But there were a few things that kept me going. One of the girls, a baby Ken, asked me if I thought my life was pointless, because I was just a server. And one of the staff members told me that they were planning to mess with me, because they thought they could do it whenever they wanted. They said they'd always give me a table. I heard this, too. They say he's cute, but I wouldn't date a waiter like that. He is such a pushover. There were other comments like that throughout the night, so I continued with their lesson. By the end of the night, each female had built up a bill ranging from $500 to $600. I handed Queen Karen the bill for $423.23, which included tax and tip. I've never seen somebody sober up this soon. She went from smiling and giggling to. She was so surprised and upset, she started to cry. She asked me right away if this was a mistake. I took the bill, checked it over, and apologized. "I'll get you the correct bill amount again." She was so relieved, thinking she'd been given someone else's bill. She called me an idiot, but then she kept talking to her friends. When I came back with the right bill, she got upset again. She just wanted to know if there was something wrong with the bill. The girls and she were so surprised. They went over every single line of the bill, including the first few that listed their original 3 rounds as complimentary. Then, they got out their phones and went over everything 100 times, adding it all up. The queen bee was visibly startled and said, "Oh, I need to use the restroom." I was a little worried she'd leave without paying, but I reminded her that we had her ID and credit card without making it too obvious. I was a little worried that she might run out of money, but I didn't want to be too obvious about it. 10 minutes later, she came back with new makeup on, clearly crying, and told me all about how the food was poor and the drinks were dreadful. She asked me to at least cut the cost in half. She also said that the baby cares would help, even though she had previously informed them that the night would be hers. Then, as if a light bulb went off in her head, she brought up her alleged relationship with the owner again, as if it would give me extra motivation to lower the amount in half. I smiled and told her, no, simply no, I can't change the bill. She took out her phone and showed me a series of text messages from someone named after my restaurant, followed by the word owner. I instantly grasped what she had been doing in the bathroom, most likely changing one of the other Karen minions' contact names and erasing prior text to establish this new one. Script. I reviewed the messages and clicked on the contact information before gently telling her that's not the owner's cell phone number. Her response was that he has multiple phones for business. Of course, you don't know all of his numbers. I replied, how about this? If we call him and he says it's okay to take 50% off the bill, then I'll do it. Her response was to begin ranting and screaming, which drew the attention of the few remaining patrons. I knew then that I needed to step in. It was time to finish this. I told her in a less conciliatory tone, I'm sorry, but you don't know the owner. You've never been here before, and if you continue ranting, I'll have to call the cops. Her tone changed as she attempted to defend herself as best she could. My response to her lame retort was, my grandfather established this restaurant. My family has been running this establishment for centuries. I've worked here for nearly my entire life. I am the sole owner of. I'm sorry, but this restaurant and I have never seen you, heard of you, or made any promises to a stranger. I have never seen you before tonight. The little Kerns were frozen and had no idea how to react. Poor Queen Bee was in tears. I added, I provided you with the table you wanted, one of these particularly reserved tables for high-end clientele, which I did not charge you for, as well as 3 rounds of free drinks. If you do not pay your account, I will call the cops and give them your identification. Karen signed the bill in tears, and the tiny Karens reached into their wallets to hand her whatever cash they had, which was probably a couple hundred. They promised to repay her more. 2 days later, an angry man arrived at my restaurant and requested that one of my bartenders talk with me. I was in the back office working, so he had to wait for about a half hour. She was with him too, but she kept her head down. I took them both to my office and showed them the security camera footage. I showed him the highlights from the security cameras, which had particularly high-quality audio because they were in the VIP area. We needed to keep good records in that region due to previous accidents that had nothing to do with this. I showed him the majority of it, and their remarks and orders were pretty much everything. When all was said and done, he rushed out with her, yelling at her the entire way. I haven't seen or heard from any of them since, but the initial bill I gave them, which did not include the $120 oysters, is. I have to tell you, I didn't lose as much money on the table in 3 rounds of drinks as you might expect. The table was intended to be empty anyway, so I didn't lose anything because I hadn't expected to gain anything in the first place. The cost of the meal and other drinks more than compensated for the loss in the first 3 rounds. So now that you know everything, am I the jerk? I think that's probably the most astonishing thing about the Karens in this situation. Aside from the money, it seemed like they were trying to muscle their way into securing a seat and avoiding paying the bill. That was their perspective on the world, and it was pretty out there. It seems that OP was going to loosen up on his entire vengeance plan, but then one of the baby Karens asked him if he felt his life was meaningless because all he had become was a waitress. That has to be one of the most insanely entitled things I've ever heard. I've seen some pretty wild stories on this channel, but this one might be the most surprising. It's so sad to see someone who sees the world in such a negative way. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a job, no matter how much you earn. This kind of attitude is pretty common among people who work as janitors and other similar roles. I think it's really unfair when people think they're better than others just because they don't have the same job. There's nothing wrong with becoming a janitor. I don't quite understand that mindset, but in this situation, she not only feels that way but she also wants to mock him for doing a difficult job such as being a waiter. At least, that's what she believes he's doing. One more thing, I'm happy this story ended on a somewhat gratifying note with the father attempting to reverse the situation, but becoming more enraged with his daughter than the restaurant owner. The only thing that scared me out was that the restaurant was recording audio. If I were sitting at that table, I would probably avoid going to a restaurant if I knew my talks were being recorded. I'm so happy it worked out for the OP. I'd love to hear how you would have handled the matter if it were your restaurant and these were your customers. Was the OP a jerk or not? And why? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.